This is The Golden Rule with David Fischer. For the latest information about bail-ins, bailouts, the economic collapse, and much more, go to landmarkgold.com.
Welcome to The Golden Rule. This is podcast number 47, and I'm David Fischer, the CEO of Landmark Capital. Margaret Thatcher once said that the problem with governments is that they always run out of other people's money. And thus is the problem not only with big government, but it's also small government, referring to the Illinois state government. They are in very bad problems right now. The government of Illinois has more than $15 billion of unpaid bills. Yes, that's what you heard me say, 15 billion with a B. And they're on pace to take in $6 billion less in 2017 than 2016. So it's one of the worst financial crises in the history of Illinois. And the state comptroller, Suzanne Mendoza, is ready to pull her hair out in frustration, I would think. But she said this: I don't know what part of we are in a crisis mode that people don't understand. This is not a false alarm, she said. She said this before the General Assembly and the governor, but they don't understand. She went on to say that the magic tricks have run out, and after a while, that's where we're at. So the shell game, if some people call it, there is no more shells, nothing under that next cup. So it's a new low for this the state. And, I've been watching the pensions of Illinois going down because of what they've invested in, number one, and number two, the crisis of 2008, the aftermath of that, and number three, just gains are not there compared to what they've been in before pre-crisis days. And also there's an ever-growing baby boomers that are retiring that's pulling from the system. So Illinois is having a major crisis, and they don't have a plan to get out of, but their credit rating is the lowest of any state. Agencies have warned them that there might be a downgrade to junk category. Recently, Moody's Investor Service earlier this month downgraded Illinois' general obligation bonds to its lowest investment grading rating, citing that the state's growing pile of unpaid bills, the $15 billion that I shared with you, and its mounting pension deficit. By the way, Illinois has a severe mounting pension deficit, probably the worst also. Those lower ratings mean higher borrowing costs since lenders view such borrowers as riskier bet. They have not passed, check this out, they have not passed a balanced budget in over 700 days. There's a tense standoff between a Republican governor and Democratic legislature, and as a result, we have this political problem going on that's turned into a financial problem. So I guess I don't understand how a state operates this that's led by a, quote, successful business governor, great political strategists in the House, and they've done it really by bad political errors, which has led to bad political incentives, and those problems have been worsened clearly by lack of market movement and low interest rate environment. But this is another example of how deeply divided the state of Illinois, which represents the state of our country, how Democrats hate Republicans and Republicans hate Democrats. It gets so bad that the two parties can't even work together in some of the most basic things. And that's what's happening in the state of Illinois. So if you look at that, it's a small microcosm of really what our country is all about. So as a result of all this, they're actually wondering if they can file bankruptcy. Now, no state is really actually bankrupt. Arkansas defaulted in 1933 as it struggled to repay its debt during the Great Depression. And Illinois is entertaining the idea, it's actually part of the plan, part of the idea in what they might be wanting to do, might be forced to be done actually, is to file bankruptcy. But at the current moment, it's impossible for a state to actually file for bankruptcy protection. But if Congress has their way down the road, they don't come up with a plan, Congress might take up this issue. And Stanford Law School professor Michael McConnell wrote an article on this that he believed that this might be one of the things that Congress actually might take up. But clearly, nevertheless, Illinois is in a serious financial pickle, which is why the radical option of bankruptcy is being actually floated as a potential solution. So we're going to keep our eye out on what's happening with Illinois, and what brought our attention to that, besides the news in the weekend, is we've been watching what's going on with their pensions. So we'll keep you abreast on what's happening with that. Another thing that's happening is people are coming out of the woodwork warning about another stock market correction. I've said this before in previous recent podcasts that Jamie Dimon has said such. Bill Gross has said such. I can list Jeffrey Gonlock even said recently last week, move your money out of the S&P 500 into cash. And there's other people coming out of the woodwork, but a legendary investor, Jim Rogers, came out, and he's not a chicken little sky is falling. He does predict that a market crash will happen within the next timeline of 2 years, a couple years, he's saying. He doesn't say it'll be next month. He doesn't say it'll be at the end of 2 years, but within that period of time. He's one that he says he's saying this one will revile anything that we've ever seen in his lifetime, and he's in his 70s, early 70s. He goes on to say that the Fed is clueless and is actually setting the U.S. up for a disaster. And he says this, it's going to be, quote, it's going to be the worst in your lifetime. It's going to be serious stuff. It's going to be the biggest in my lifetime. We've had financial problems in America every 4 to 7 years since the beginning of the Republic. But this one is going to be the biggie. So with that, I wanted to share with you some historical precedents. What happens when we have a stock market correction, which we're clearly showing signs of. And, you know, one of the signs is everybody's in euphoria and it keeps going all-time highs. We're beyond the normal criteria of what price per earnings ratio are, and we're clearly in that. So a stock market crash, here is the relationship to what that does in what gold does to that, actually. So the relationship between a stock market crash and gold. Well, in 1929, gold didn't do anything because cash was backed by gold, so there's no big run-up in gold because cash was not in a panic. 1929, we had banks leveraging money, just like they're now allowed to do with this revised Dodd-Frank Act I spoke about last podcast. But in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, and that's when the stock market corrections gold related to it. So let's look at that. We didn't really have a stock market correction per se in the 70s. It was just a faltered market, and that market there, the Fed raised rates. Gold went up 500 to 1,225% in 5 years, depending upon what kind of products you were in gold while the Fed was raising rates to double digits. Stocks were flat, and so in reference to that, people diversified their portfolio. We get to another scenario called Black Monday 1987, which was the second largest drop in stocks. And gold went up 35% in the first year, and in the aftermath, a hedge fund was set up on Wall Street because they were trying to capture the money that was moving out of Wall Street called money under management, and $100 million was put into a fund that bought physical gold and silver products, and that fund was ran by Kidder Peabody. That fund, the market as a result of that fund, should I say, actually went up between 100 and 700%, while bullion products went up 35%. And this was done in an 18-year period of time in the aftermath of Black Monday 1987. So there's different products that do different things, just like stocks. There's different stocks that do different things. There are different index different indexes out there in stocks. There's different products in gold and silver. There's 6 major areas to invest in gold and silver, and 3 of the 6 are not very good, and the other 3 are mainstream. And of that, there's thousands of different markets within those 3 main markets. You can call my company and learn about this by calling and learning about the 3 columns. So you haven't ever heard about the 3 columns. This is a side note here. That should be the wake-up call to call my company and learn about the 3 basic markets to choose from and what to invest in. So with that, the fund pulled out. The markets came down, but the markets were higher before. After the fund pulled out, the markets were higher then than before the fund went into the markets and physicals. So that's Black Monday. We had 2001, we had a dot-com bubble that burst. The tech bubble kind of looks very similar to what we're looking at now in the NASDAQ, since 43% of the volume of upward movement in the NASDAQ is tied to the FANG stock, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. FANG. And those 4 stocks have led the tech charge and a few others. It's insane what's going on with the tech rally, but there's very similar signs of what we saw in 2001. As a result of the dot-com bubble burst in 2001, that started a multi-year run in gold along with debt of our country, and gold more than doubled in the next 6 years. In 2008, we have a stock market correction, and stocks came down 40+%, 45, 50% in some cases. Gold went up the same period of time, 72% the first year in 2008, and then went on a multi-year run from there and outperformed stocks, and gold doubled in just a matter of less than 3 years. So we saw a big movement in gold. And it continued its move for about 5 years, which went up almost 3 times as much, not quite, just shy of that. And from there, it had a correction, and it was manipulated by Deutsche Bank and a few others, which I've talked about in previous podcasts. But now it's poised for another major run while we're getting ready to have another stock market correction, according to many people like Jim Rogers and others. So the key is now to diversify. We have a lot of components that shows that we could see some major problems in the very near future, and it's defying some normal things that should be a wake-up call. So you can call my company and get some information about the 3 columns. This is the main fundamentals that I can share with you after going through that little short process. You'll know more than 95% of all the people out there that have invested in gold. And so if you have already invested in gold, you never heard of the 3 columns, that should be the wake-up call to make the phone call to talk to my one of my representatives, and they can help you understand all about this. We'll get your eyes open. You can call my company by 877-448-2646, or you can go to our website at landmarkgold.com. Until then, this is David Fischer, CEO of Landmark Capital, and this is the Golden Rule Podcast number 47.
This is the Golden Rule with David Fischer. For the latest information about bail-ins, bailouts, the economic collapse, and much more, go to landmarkgold.com.